Rollins, because Seth is being cut off. It's a problem. I'll fix that later. It's fine. It's fine.
We'll
it's
fix
fine.
it in post.
I ain't fixing shit in post, dog. Your boy's tired. All right, here we go. Mm-hmm. It's slightly less Rollins. Okay, I'm not mad at that.
Right there. That's all right.
Miss Destiny Diamond.
Seth Rollins.
Paul Heyman. Bron Breakker. Bronson Reed? Huh?
What? Let's talk about it.
What?
There's so much that needs to be said. One thing that I want to touch on is how this faction has been compared to Evolution. Of course, you have the Seth Rollins in the role of Triple H. He is the mastermind behind all of this. He's the one putting it all together. He's the one leading the pack. Of course, Paul Heyman, somewhat playing the role of a Ric Flair, where he is the greatest of all time, and he is guiding them with his wisdom and his knowledge and his success and everything he's done. Now, of course, Bron Breakker comes into the picture, and everybody says, all right, he's the muscle, he's Batista, who's going to be Randy Orton. We were all so very, very wrong.
Bronson fucking Reed. That's going to be the Randy Orton.
We should have. No, because what we should have known is that this generational superstar, Bron Breakker, was not to be the muscle. He was not to be the Batista, but Bronson Reed was to be the muscle. And he was to be the Batista. Because Bron Breakker, second generation star, nephew of Scott Steiner, son of Rick Steiner, of course he's going to be the Randy Orton of the group. He's going to be one of the greatest of all time. He's going to be a 14, 15, 16-time world champion by the end of his career. He is that damn good. He is the star. He is the coal that will be squeezed into the next diamond. Bron Breakker is the future face of this company. We should have seen that he was the Randy Orton from the get-go. I know that his big, beautiful muscles blinded us all, and his spear, obviously, and his power, but this man is the entire package, just like Randy Orton. He has the look, he has the speed, he has the agility, he has the strength, he has the finishing move. This man has everything. There's nothing he's missing. So of course he's the Randy Orton.
I think personally,
that's insane.
I think personally for me, why I was equating him to Batista was specifically looking towards how Evolution broke up. Because Randy Orton kind of failed in terms of Evolution. Randy Orton did not find his footing until the Legend Killer gimmick. Evolution didn't do a ton for Randy Orton. It was when he found his footing. He was the diamond, quote unquote, sure. But as soon as he left Evolution and he was a babyface, it was bad. Batista was the star to come out of Evolution. And I think the second Bron Breakker joined with Seth Rollins, everybody said, when's he going to turn on Seth Rollins? When is that moment going to happen where... If you remember the magic that was, it was Elimination Chamber in November leading up to the Royal Rumble. And Batista was in the match. It was Batista, Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, Triple H, I think Edge, and I don't remember the other man. But essentially, Triple H was locked in a double submission. Jericho had him in the walls and Benoit had him in the crossface. And Batista came out and saved his ass. And then when you got to the end of the match and it was time for Triple H to pay back that favor, Batista was being pinned. Triple H stood up, thought about it for a second, and then sat back down like he had collapsed. And the magic of the entire audience going, when that moment happened, I cannot wait to see that moment happen with Bron Breakker, Seth Rollins. Of course, I want to wait. I want that to happen a year and a half, 2 years from now. I don't want it to happen in 3 months. But
nope.
I'm excited to get there. That is why I personally was equating Bron Breakker to Batista, because I do not see Randy Orton as a Evolution success story, but I want to see Bron Breakker as a success from this particular faction.
Listen, Bron Breakker is going to be a success no matter what, but I would like to respectfully disagree because it was because of Evolution and while he was in Evolution that Randy Orton became the youngest ever world heavyweight champion. Now, to be fair, it was not a long reign, it was not a monumental reign, except for the fact that he made history. But he still made history, he still became top dog, and it all came crumbling apart because his guys turned on him.
What I will say as a result to that are two things. One is the history leading up to that, which was Brock Lesnar was the previous youngest world champion in history, which played a huge part in Randy getting this win because when Brock left the company, they wanted to wipe as many records away from Brock as they could, which was a big reason Randy Orton was put in this match to win, so they could then call Randy Orton the youngest world champ of all time and kind of erase Brock Lesnar from that. Also, it really hurts the legacy of this run, and we will never truly get to know how impactful this could have been for Randy Orton, for the sole reason that his first world title was won against Chris Benoit. And so, as a result, this title match is never talked about. It is never brought up on air, and we kind of shun away from speaking about it. So I think if the Benoit tragedy hadn't happened, we would have a much, much clearer picture of how much Evolution meant for Randy Orton. However, Randy Orton's biggest moment in Evolution is kind of a black mark on his career because it involves Benoit. So it is unfortunate that no matter what way we discuss this situation, it's kind of barred on both the history and the future of it, in terms of Randy Orton was put in this position mostly because of the Brock Lesnar situation, and we can't know the effects of it because of the Chris Benoit situation.
Valid.
I do... What was your reaction when Bronson Reed came out and you realized, I talked about this moment live when it happened, and at first I thought it was Jeff Cobb. So I was very confused. I was like, what the fuck is about to happen? Are we about to get like Solo Sikoa joining with Seth Rollins? I would love that.
Listen, I'm not mad at that idea.
But
yeah,
it was not Jeff Cobb. It was Bronson Reed. So what was your reaction? Were you happy about it? What was going on?
You know, I have to say I wasn't mad. I think that it's cool, and I think there's a very interesting story there. I think that it gives Bronson something to sink his teeth into. Obviously, yes, he's been injured, but I feel like he's also struggled to find his footing on the main roster and to find consistency. Almost in the way you were in our previous episode, you were talking about how concerned you are about Obafemi getting called up to the main roster and how there are two directions he can go and how rare it is that you find success in either path that he could have coming out of NXT. Bronson Reed fits that mold of a powerhouse who comes in and dominates everybody, of course. Now, like I said, I feel like he's struggled. You know, he was released, brought back. He came in and he was dominant, but then he got injured. And we haven't seen him since. I think it's a really interesting pairing. I will admit I had hoped that it would have been someone else, somebody who really needed that rub, but maybe that's because they want to give the rub to Bronson Reed. You know, I'm not his number one fan, but I also don't hate the man. I'm excited to see what he can do. But there's something that people are talking about, and how Seth Rollins was absolutely destroyed and decimated and basically left for dead by this man not too long ago. And this was covered and explained by Paul Heyman on Monday Night Raw. And I thought that this was done so beautifully, because all you heard after this union was about how he murdered Seth Rollins. How can Seth trust him? How can they be friends? How can they get along? How can this pairing be? Paul Heyman went into vivid detail about how Bronson Reed decimated and destroyed Seth Rollins. Tsunami after tsunami after tsunami. Seth, better than anyone, knows what Bronson Reed is capable of. And because of that, Seth wants Bronson on his side. You don't want to be across the ring from him. You want him on his side, fighting on your behalf. So of course Seth Rollins is going to have, he's going to have to recruit a Bronson Reed, because who else can get Bronson Reed to that main event status? Seth Rollins. A man that he's faced in a main event or two. They've fought in a main event before. So now they have the opportunity to run it back in a very different way. And with Seth in Bronson Reed's corner, the sky's the limit. Now, there is something I want to touch on, something that is an actual issue within this group. And you unintentionally touched on it, and that's the fact that we have a Bron and a Bronson in the same faction. That's going to get annoying.
Oh my God.
That's going to get really fucking annoying. And now I apologize. I know there's nothing that can be done. They're not going to change either of their names.
They might.
To God.
They might.
I mean, thank you. Listen, thank God Vince McMahon is gone. They're not going to call him Reed. They're not going to call him Breakker.
I think they're going to call him Reed. I think they're going to call him Reed.
I really don't. I really don't. Maybe they could. I don't see it. I genuinely don't see it. I pray to God it doesn't happen. I am concerned. I have my concerns. Let's just say that. But if that's the biggest issue we're going to have with these guys together, can't complain too much.
Well, the other issue I have here is the fact Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed is the fact that Bron Breakker is now forced to be the Randy Orton, essentially. Where Bronson Reed is now the muscle of the group, where does that put Bron Breakker? Because do you want to have two big bodyguards following you around? Is that the story they're telling? Because if so, this would essentially be the second coming of the Visionary.
J&J Security?
No, those were not.
Is this the new age J&J Security?
No, those were. This is the new age. If you remember the Messiah, that's what I was trying to say. The Messiah,
of course,
with the AOP. Yes. So I don't want it to be. Why I wanted a tag team here was two smaller guys who could essentially be the J&J Security. Just a lot more accomplished in terms of modern day. They're not just going to go out and get their ass kicked like Joey Mercury and Jamie Noble. They could actually go out there and hold their own for the most part, especially in a 2v1 situation, because that doesn't take any star power away from Bron Breakker then. At that point, with Bron Breakker, he is still the sole ace up Seth Rollins' sleeve, where he is the guy that Seth is shaping to be the star of the future with Paul Heyman. And now it's essentially you have two twins and only one of them gets to be the favorite. And I feel like that is going to be, and they teased it already. They teased it already with Bron and Bronson staring down each other. And very obviously, Seth pushed back on Bron for a second. He's like, hey, no, we're good. And he gave Bronson Reed a hug, but it was very clearly sold. Bron Breakker did not know Bronson Reed was on their side until that moment in the ring. Bron Breakker
are going to butt heads like brothers. I'm so excited to see it.
I am too, and I hope they can play into that aspect, because right now it is going to be one of these guys is going to play second fiddle. And you could tell a beautiful story with that, or it can be really awkward. And I pray to God it's not really awkward.
And I pray to God that second fiddle doesn't go to Bron Breakker, because like we said, he is the future of this industry. He is the next diamond. He is the next future star. Now, obviously, Bronson Reed needs a little bit more rub, because Bron Breakker is already that much of a star on his own. So we'll just have to see where this goes. I do kind of see how, I think it could be very intriguing having two heavies, having two big muscly men, having two guys to do the heavy lifting. I want to see that dynamic, and maybe it even becomes a game of one-upsmanship between the two of them. Similarly, how we had Sheamus and Cesaro, how they were like, well, I'm going to have the best match. No, I'm going to have the best match. No, I'm the hardest hitter. No, I'm the hardest hitter. No, I'm the strongest guy. I'm the strongest guy. Having something like that between these two where it is more of a friendly competition, a brotherly loves type of scenario, I think that there's a lot of things that they can explore together here in this.
Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar. If you haven't seen that feud, oh my God, leading up, I can't remember if it was leading up to WrestleMania or if it was leading up to the rematch after WrestleMania, but they had a whole, like, one-upsmanship contest, and it's Comedy Brock was so good back then, and Comedy Kurt is just untouched. But definitely check that out.
Anything you can do, I can do better. Oh my gosh. The anything you can do, I can do better type of scenario is so good with those two. And especially the one that sticks out in my mind the most is the push-up contest where they had to do whatever it was, 1,000 push-ups. And Brock went first and Kurt counted and he's like, all right, now it's your turn. And Kurt's like, hell no. I'm not going to tire myself out like that. Good luck tonight, buddy.
Yeah, it was just peak. My favorite the whole session was the like really cute lady who was backstage, and they were arguing over like who could get her number essentially, and Kurt Angle walks up to her and he takes a big old swig of milk, and Brock walks up behind him and pats him on the back, and he just goes and just spurts it all over her face. Kurt makes it look so natural, and Brock just goes, good luck, champ, and walks away, and the girl looks pissed and Kurt looks flabbergasted. It is peak Kurt Angle. It is such good energy from Brock Lesnar. And that extra looked a lot like Emma Watson, by the way. It was really weird. I had to Google it. I was like, is this Emma Watson? What the fuck is happening? What I do want to touch upon, this is also a genius move by Seth Rollins. Because what we touched upon was, what is everybody saying the second Bron Breakker was announced? When is the turn going to happen? When is Braun going to turn on Seth? And him doing this gives him the perfect fail out no matter what direction. Whichever star tries to turn their back on Seth Rollins doesn't have to lift a finger to defend himself, because if Bron Breakker gets upset and 6 months down the road he tries to screw over Seth Rollins, all Seth has to do is whisper something in Bronson Reed's ear, and now Bronson Reed, the man who has been in a rivalry, that this whole brotherly rivalry we're talking about this whole time was all this tension, now has a reason to attack Bron Breakker, and those men can go at it, and Seth can go on unscathed. So it gives him a perfect, essentially self-implode button for his group that launches him to stardom and gets him out of harm's way. I really, really, really like that aspect of it, and gives them a nice, really, really good card that they can have in their back pocket there.
I also think that it's a genius way to tie in, they're talking about Bron Breakker turning on Seth. Well, here is Bronson Reed, who was one of his biggest rivals, who hated him more than anybody. I mean, who's to say that that's not a possibility? Or if Seth is willing to team with somebody who he had such a heated rivalry with, and he thinks he's not going to turn, why the hell would Bron Breakker turn? You know what I mean? They have that dynamic to play with as well.
And the other thing I love is the other question is, Seth Rollins is almost 40. He's in the aging part of his career. He is not as big of a star as CM Punk is. He's not as big of a star as Roman Reigns is. I love him. He's my favorite of the trio by far. But there's no question, if you put CM Punk on a billboard, if you put Roman Reigns on a billboard, or if you put Seth Rollins on a billboard, who is selling the most amount of tickets of those three? It's either Roman or it's Punk. It is not Seth. I wish it was Seth, and if it was me, I'm buying the Seth Rollins ticket. But you give him a year with this faction and with Paul Heyman, and he's getting to that level. That's the whole point of this. That's why Seth is getting this boost, because they're going to turn Seth Rollins. This is just like Roman Reigns was at in 2020. He was where Seth Rollins is at now, where he has that momentum behind him. He has all the power in the world. They just need to legitimize it. And putting Paul Heyman with him and putting these guys behind him is going to do that. Now, Seth Rollins, looking at it 2 years from now, and Paul Heyman now has Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed, much more experienced versions of these guys. And Seth has finally lost his world title. He has finally suffered defeat. Who's to say, instead of doing the evolution, Triple H and Ric Flair kick out the big guy and take the title from him, who's to say Paul Heyman doesn't stick his 2 guard dogs on Seth Rollins and kicks Rollins out? And then you could build to a crazy match where Bron Breakker now has to find a third man to support, Paul Heyman has to find a third man to support Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed. Now you pull up an Obafemi. Now you pull up a third man who can match the energy and the intensity of these two. And now you have a hurt, remorseful man who created this group of monsters that are now unstoppable in Seth Rollins. And who does he turn to but Roman Reigns and CM Punk? And you have the Shield, right? The Shield, CM Punk's group that he invented to protect him. You have CM Punk, Roman Reigns, and Seth Rollins are the only ones who can unite to take down this Paul Heyman group. Take my money. You can't do it now. You have to spend 2 years getting there. But I see the future plan that they could do here. And if they have Paul turn on Seth instead of turning on one of these two and out Seth from this group, wow. What a way to twist this story on its head. And you get to make a third star out of it. And you essentially have a new age version of the Shield with Bron Breakker, Bronson Reed, and who the third star would be. You're welcome. You're welcome, Internet. I charge by the hour. Hour late.
Do you want to hear more of this genius right here? Damn, my camera's flipped. It's this way.
No, that was good. That was great, dog.
I hope you enjoy that. No, listen. You guys hear the genius that's coming out of this guy's mouth right now? You want to hear more of that? Like this podcast episode and comment down below. What do you think right here of this faction that is forming right now? What do you think of this new dynamic now that Seth, Paul, and Bron have brought in Bronson Reed? Also, what do you think about their names? Do you think someone's going to drop a first name? Do you think someone's going to get a rebranding? Or do you think they're going to keep it as is? Also, which one of these men is going to be the first to capture gold under the tutelage of Paul Heyman? We want to hear more from you guys. Please comment down below. This is important.